Good evening. Today is May 3rd, and welcome to the Listen and Learn podcast. A very eventful day today. So, just going to focus on two stories. Primarily, the breaking news tonight that the House of Representatives will be holding its vote on the American Health Care Act tomorrow. Again, this is the repeal and replace of Obamacare. Yesterday we had said, looked like it had maybe a 50-50 chance of passing but through the House. But given some last-minute arm twisting and a deal struck by the president himself, it seems, it looks like there is a deal. Passage seems much likelier than not after the debacle of the first healthcare vote. You can't believe the House leadership and Speaker Ryan would be dumb enough to bring something to the floor of the House that couldn't pass. So we'll just go over briefly what happened. So yesterday, it seemed like they were a handful of votes short, and I want to bring up this quick chart for you that shows the breakdown of the House of Representatives. As you can see, if you look at the House GOP, you really have to kind of think of it as three groups. You have the House Freedom Caucus, which is 32 members. The Tuesday group, which is the group of moderate House Republicans, that is about 50 members. And then the rest of the House GOP, that's kind of center-right, and that is 156 members. You need to get 216 at the moment to get a majority. So what that means is the House Republicans need to pick up 60 members, or some members of the House Freedom Caucus and some members of the Tuesday group in order to actually pass legislation. And the problem they had with the first version of the American Health Care Act a few weeks ago was every time they picked up a couple members of the House Freedom Caucus by making a concession to the right, they lost a couple members of the Tuesday group, and vice versa happened, and they can never quite get to 216. Then last week, the House Freedom Caucus struck a deal with one of the leaders of the Tuesday group, Tom MacArthur, that brought them on board, but kept some moderates still uneasy. And essentially what that compromise does is provides a waiver to each state where they can waive out of all of the Obamacare health insurance regulations as long as they can prove that it would lead to lower premiums within their state. At the same time, states could opt not to do that. So what likely would happen is a liberal state like New York would keep more of the Obamacare architecture, whereas a state like Tennessee would eliminate all of its shackles. And that seemed to do a decent job, and by all accounts, they were 4 or 5 votes short as of yesterday. But what the president has done, he met today with a member of Congress called Fred Upton, who wanted to add another $8 billion to the high-risk pool. So the bill sets aside $130 billion for high-risk pools, which essentially help those with pre-existing conditions pay for their health care and mutualize their risk across the system. By agreeing to put $8 billion more into this system, into these from the 130, so it'd be closer to 138 now. After meeting with the president, Congressman Fred Upton and Congressman Billy Long reversed from being no votes to yes votes. And it looks like that one amendment alone has brought on another 3 members. So in total, you added 5 members, and that gets you close to the 216 that are needed. Then it looks like beyond further phone calls and some arm twisting, I'm sure, they've gotten just over that level. So they brought enough moderates on, in addition to maintaining the endorsement from the House Freedom Caucus, that it looks like the bill should pass sometime tomorrow, probably in the afternoon. Given the debacle last time, can't call anything 100% certain, but it looks far likelier than not to get through the House, the first step of meeting a 7-year campaign promise from Republicans. But all this does is move it to the Senate, where the math gets a little bit more difficult. And we'll go to that now. If you see here, you need obviously 50% to pass bills. In the House, the Republicans currently control 55% of the seats. So they could essentially lose 1 out of every 9 seats that they hold, or 22 out of the 238 members, and still pass legislation. In the Senate, where they only control 52%, they can only lose 2 members. So there's a lot less members you can lose and still pass a bill. So what I think you will likely see is the Senate make some changes to the House bill. The House bill cuts $900 billion in taxes and $1 trillion in spending. So you end up saving $100 billion over a decade. My guess is the Senate is going to plow some of those $100 billion of savings to increase the subsidies for Americans who are over the ages of 40 and 50 to ensure that their premiums do not go up. And in addition to that, they probably will not cut Medicaid quite as much as the House bill does. Passage through the Senate, just given the fact that you can only lose 2 members, and then you would need Mike Pence to come in to break the tie, whereas you could lose 22 members in the House of Representatives, is going to be tough. Best case, we're talking 30 to 45 days. And, I don't, while I think the Senate is going to work hard to try and find some kind of compromise, it will be a difficult process. I think it's probably still a 50-50 effort at that. And then once the Senate passes it, they have to reconcile any of the changes with the House, and the House will get one more vote added. Do or die, are we going to repeal Obamacare like we promised to do for 7 years? But just getting this through the House will help change the narrative that out of Trump's, and a somewhat unfair narrative, again, given yesterday's discussion of the Congressional Review Act and how Trump has been able to remove regulations that his first 100 days did not show a big legislative win. Well, it took 105 days, but we're making a major step to repealing Obamacare. And let's just step back for a moment and think of why this is so important. Just today, you had Aetna, one of the country's biggest health insurers, announce they're leaving the state of Virginia next year. That means that they're going to operate in a total of 2 states. 2 years ago, they were operating in 15 states. You continue to see insurers fleeing the market, leading to less and less competition because they're losing so much money. It's causing premiums to skyrocket. The state of Iowa may not even have an insurer next year. Some people in the state of Alaska are paying $50,000 in premiums. And we need to create a system that, again, makes healthcare affordable for people and reduce taxes to the tune of $900 billion. The other key thing I want to bring up is that we're removing the employer mandate that made an employer, once they get to 50 employees, they had to start providing healthcare. So what happened? Small businesses had to stop growing at 45 employees. And let's bring up this chart that shows how small businesses have felt since the election. And you can see we saw a massive spike in small business optimism, where they felt finally that they have a president who's going to cut regulation and help them grow. And small businesses are the key engines of growth and productivity in our economy that will let us start growing at 3% instead of 2%. Removing this regulation is a huge deal for them. And it's a big reason why you saw this big spike over 100, the highest it's been in over a decade after Trump won. It is all about healthcare. And if we want that small business optimism to lead to small business hiring and small business capital investing, we have to get rid of the employer mandate, which is a crucial part of the Obamacare repeal and replace bill. And that segues to this next graph I want to show you. And this is the percentage of American employees who work for new businesses. There's not only do small businesses create growth, the real growth comes out of new businesses that have innovative ideas that create the jobs of tomorrow. And what we've seen is a steady decline for the past 25 years, one that has reached record lows under the Obama administration, where only 0.6% of all Americans work for a new business. And over the past 8 years, you saw new businesses creations with actually less than businesses being closed. So there are fewer businesses in America today than there were 8 years ago. And a key thing is all these regulations and new costs, like forcing new businesses to provide health insurance for employees, is a barrier to starting a business. And instead of trying to take out a risk on a new job, you stay in your existing one where the potential to create new jobs and new wealth for the rest of the country is lower. So by bringing back some of these regulations, and the key one being that 50 employer mandate, you will hopefully start seeing new business creation pick up and new job employment pick up. So tomorrow is a huge day, but it looks like we've got a major legislative success on our hands. Then quickly, small story lost in the healthcare shuffle is that tomorrow is the National Day of Prayer, and you're going to see the president put out an executive order that removes some of the Johnson Amendment. This amendment blocked churches from engaging in any political activity, and he's going to essentially order the Treasury Department to less strictly enforce that and ensure that churches are not losing their freedom of speech and are able to provide some political comments without fear of losing their tax exemption. You saw the president win 81% of white evangelicals this past election. It was really evangelicals who brought Trump into the White House. He carried a bigger share of them than President Bush. And I think it's safe to say that Trump is less of a typical fit for evangelicals than the Texan George and evangelical himself, George W. Bush, was. But they put a bet on him that he would be good to them. And you've seen it with Gorsuch, with removing the Mexico City policy, and now with this, that he is ensuring that no one has to worry about their freedom of religion anymore. So those are the two big stories, an eventful day. Thank you again for listening. If you enjoyed the commentary, please give us a thumbs up, maybe hit the subscribe button, and share the videos with friends and families. Have a great one.